Hello once again, Ohio. This is the Retirement Blueprint Show with Tim Lofton of Axum Planning and Wealth. I'm your host, Spike Spangle. On today's program, it's rates, Roths, and retirement. What do they all mean to you? What's going on in the big bad world of finance and how it applies to your retirement? We'll start out with interest rates. We want to talk a little bit about Roths and how to use them and how to best maximize your retirement. Mr. Tim Lofton, how you doing this week, buddy?
I'm doing great, Spike. How's your week been?
Pretty good, pretty good. We had a good radio show. We do a full hour there. I enjoy doing that every single week. But let's dive right into it for our folks here. Because we've seen interest rates go up several times over the last 16, 18 months. It's one of the largest rate hikes and fastest in U.S. history. But we're at about 5.25% right now. I just want to give some perspective to the interest rate changes and this high increase. Is this a good or bad thing for today's retiree?
Well, it has a ripple effect, Spike. I mean, if you think about it, when interest rates increase, it touches so many different areas of our lives. I mean, things like a mortgage, all of a sudden, people are looking at houses that are smaller than they would have been looking at just a couple years ago. Buying a new car all of a sudden becomes an issue. And credit cards, credit card debt becomes a larger payment for that minimum payment.
So, okay, all right, Mr. Negative Nelly, but how about I show you the positive? But we've got some safe money solutions. Yes. Things like we're seeing online banks, 4 or 5%. Make sure they're FDIC insured. I'm not suggesting them as a place to go, but if it works for you, you want to make sure that they're safe. There's also other tools out there. I'll say the word annuity, things like that. I've heard people like yourself say, we're seeing some of the best products I've seen in your career.
Yes.
We don't know if they're the right choice for you yet, but the Safe for Money, those are good. Some good numbers we've been seeing recently.
Definitely, and you know it's been years since we've talked about putting money in a money market account, or that CD rates are at a level that are worth looking at, and with that ripple effect has both good and bad ripple, right? Okay. I mean, there's the things that we're paying interest on, which have obviously increased, but there's the things where it's paying interest to us that we're also seeing. Now the question is it an offset? Are we getting enough now on our safe money to maybe offset some of these higher costs?
Well, as I'm looking at the credit card numbers that you give me, as they scooch up towards 25 to 29%.
Yes. So 5 isn't going to cut it.
And you're getting 4% in an online bank. I don't know. I'm not that great at math, but it doesn't seem even for me. Where should we be putting that money then? We don't want to be just sitting in those safe accounts if we're paying that out in our credit cards.
And that's exactly right. I mean, so as we look at, maybe a combination of paying off debt with maybe some of that money, because that's the math question here, is if I've got a large sum of money sitting at a 4 or 5% rate, but I'm paying interest at a 15 to 25% rate, it's a pretty easy decision.
Right. Now, one of the things, though, let's say that you are downsizing your home. You talked about mortgages there, and you've been paying into this asset, hopefully that's been growing for maybe 30 years, at least 15 years or so. It's all paid off. You want to downsize. The problem is the inventory that's out there that's smaller is that much more expensive today. Even if you're saying to yourself, well, I'm not going to need a mortgage. We're going to pay cash for it, and I'll take what's left over. Problem is there isn't as much left over as there used to be. So the downsizing, is this maybe a waiting game for you, or do we think this is where home prices are going to stay?
Well, let me tell you about what a couple of clients have done. So we've had 2 or 3 clients who have decided to sell their house because they can get such a high price right now on the market. And they've actually decided to rent, which is kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
Because we've always been taught renting's bad, we're throwing away money. But they're renting in the short term with the idea that as these prices fall, they're going to be in a better position to maybe step into the house that they wanted at a better price point.
Right. But our question is, will prices fall, or are they just going to relatively stabilize? Or maybe they'll be looking for another location to buy into. But yeah, there's a lot at play right here. But again, so with our interest rates going up, are there other opportunities? Where can we look to take advantage of these? Maybe something that might be a little bit more than 4%.
Well, I think, as we look at retirement, we've got in the habit the last few years of refinancing everything. We refinanced our house to those lower rates. We refinanced our cars. We, in some cases, even refinanced our credit cards. And now those opportunities are gone. But what we do have an opportunity to do is refinance our retirement. And what I mean by that is with these rates increasing and some of the products out there, we're looking at the opportunity to earn higher rates than we've ever seen before. And so as people are coming into the office, or if maybe you're sitting out there right now saying, wait a minute, I don't know what you're talking about refinancing my retirement. This is an opportunity where you could call into the show today and actually set up a time for a complimentary review. And we can share with you what a lot of clients have been doing over the last 6 to 7 months in locking in some of these better opportunities.
Fantastic. I mean, I totally get it. So when we say the word refinance, most of you probably think mortgage, right? As interest rates go down, we look at things like the mortgage, the car, maybe even the credit cards. We call our credit card company and say, is there a lower number that I'm allowed to achieve? I pay my bills on time. But as interest rates go up, you say the possibility for refinancing the retirement, looking for those higher interest rate tools that might provide you the same kind of couple of $100, $300, $400 of additional income to our monthly spend. Again, we don't know that it's for everybody, but what you just said, calling into the phone number, they can sit down with you and find out if it's worth refinancing the retirement?
Right.
All right.
And I think that if you don't know what's out there. If you maybe have not heard about some of these opportunities, it's an easy way to kind of come in, share your story. Let us take a look at everything that you're doing and see if there's some opportunities there where you can upgrade what you're already doing on a good retirement plan.
All right, Tim, we're going to take a very short break here. Should you refinance your retirement? Can you? And will it save you a few dollars every single month while you're in retirement? Why don't you find out? Call the phone number right here so you can come on in, sit down with Tim and the team, and we'll take a look at refinancing your retirement. We'll be back with more Tim Lofton and the Retirement Blueprint Show right after this.
As a good saver, you've been putting away money during your working years. Studies find that the biggest fear of retirees is running out of money. Market volatility isn't just the downward movement of stock prices, it's the size and frequency of change. The more dramatic the ups and downs, the higher the volatility. This can put savers who are newly retired or a few years away from being retired at greater risk. Today's generation of retirees is not receiving traditional pensions as our parents or grandparents did. Instead, we have retirement accounts such as 401ks or 403bs. These accounts typically expose your money to market risk. The last thing you want right before retirement is to lose a portion of the money you need for income. But how do you turn these accounts into a retirement income? Is it safe to keep all your retirement money sitting in the stock market? The last thing you want is to lose a portion of the money you need for income due to market loss. By working with a financial professional, you can learn how to turn a portion of your savings into an income stream for life and income for the life of your spouse if you're married. We all have moments in our lives when we wish we had taken action sooner. Don't let procrastination reign on your retirement parade. Act now before it's too late. Please call our office to set up your no-cost, no-obligation retirement income review today.
Welcome back to the Retirement Blueprint Show with Tim Lofton of Axum Planning and Wealth. I'm your host, Spike Spangle. Today we're talking about rates, Roths, and your retirement. Rates being those interest rates. We discussed that a little bit. But the why behind it, let's move on to the Roths. There was somebody who was in our financial services industry who wrote an article. I'm not going to say his name. It is totally up to you if you want to. He was saying in this article, published in one of our very, very large magazines, saying, stop contributing to your 401k right now. And I wanted to make sure it wasn't clickbait, so look through the article. And what it was really saying is also, if there's an option, look for those Roth 401ks. What was behind this story? You bring them up if you want to, but I get very nervous when people do an all or nothing, as we've talked about before. Stop contributing, that's dangerous territory, Tim.
Right, and this is where, I think people get into trouble is they read headlines and they don't read the article. And, this caught me off guard as well, Spike, when you shared that article with me, because I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, why would anybody stop contributing to the retirement plan, especially a corporate retirement plan where there's usually matching, there's an opportunity to save tax deferred or whatever the case may be. And given the numbers that you and I've talked about on previous shows where people are so far behind on retirement savings, I was just like, what is this? But the idea here, I guess kind of as we looked at the article, was that, do we want to save tax deferred versus having that money go tax free? I think that's kind of the heart behind the article, and it's a great question. The problem is exactly what you said, and that is, the all or nothing. We should all stop doing this and all start doing that, and that's just dangerous territory because you don't know, as an individual, how that fits into your plan, which is why it's so important to sit down with somebody, let them look at what you're currently doing to decide whether or not the Roth 401k, which will grow tax-free, but you have to pay taxes on it up front as it's going in, or should I continue doing the pre-tax money where I'm getting the savings on the tax up front and delaying it for a future date? Because both are good plans.
Yeah, and there was a lot of financial advisors then that responded to this, and they were pushing back on it, saying, again, exactly like you are, as well as a retirement specialist, this is dangerous. You can't just type articles or at least titles like that.
Right.
It's a bit misleading. But now let's go a little bit further into it. What he was really trying to do was get us into those Roth 401ks. Again, I'm not saying an all or nothing, but let's say you are 60. Let's say we've saved $400,000 or $500,000 into our tax-deferred 401k. Is it worth doing it for another 3 or 4 or 5 years before retiring?
What's interesting in this, and I could give you 2 client stories on each side of this.
Okay.
The first one is exactly that. The client was 59 years old. They lived in Centerville, and they were looking at this type of situation. They'd saved about $750,000 in their 401k pre-tax. And they really didn't have another source of income that they could go to if they needed to take money out in retirement. And he was about 5 to 6 years out from retirement. So as we looked at his situation, we stopped contributing to the regular 401k, started to contribute to the Roth 401k to simply give him options down the road. Where we're looking at the Roth and tax-free income is if taxes go up, which they are potentially set to do the end of 2025, if all you have is pre-tax money, you have no tax control when you start taking your income. And that's a real problem.
Yeah.
We love flexibility. We want to have that flexibility. So as we're looking at the Roth, it allows us to be able to maybe offset some of our income in a tax-free manner to help manage those taxes if we see a spike in tax rates.
A spike in tax rates, right. We do believe there's going to be a spike in tax rates, and I will have nothing to do with it. But
You don't have control over that?
No, we don't.
Is there, are we still in debt a little bit in the country?
Yeah. Thanks a lot. If you go to the National Debt Clock online, I mean, the millions of dollars that have every single second to the national debt is
the numbers,
incredible.
if you look at it, the numbers are actually moving so fast that you can't see like the thousands. Like it's that quick.
It's not like the clicking meter that it used to be at the gas station where you could watch to see what your gallons were costing you. It is rolling so fast. But the non-funny part of it is that somebody's going to have to try to pay us out of that debt.
Correct.
And they're looking at things like our retirement accounts. So much money that's in them that hasn't been taxed yet. So we're trying to talk about this preemptively. Start using things like Roth 401ks. What about the conversion aspect of it? Let's say we're 60, we're 62. Is it worth doing that conversion, rolling it out? Is that total what we call in-service withdrawal, or can you do it and keep it at the work account? How does this all work?
So after 59 and a half, you have the option to be able to roll over your money in a 401k, even though you're still working at the company. And so you're still going to contribute to your 401k, you're still going to stay in the plan, but the bulk of those assets can be rolled over to an IRA. And then you can take a look at if you do have a risk problem, or maybe your 401k is just limited on what you can put in it. this option has become very, very popular, especially for people that are working now into their 70s. And they don't have, the traditional investments that you would typically have in your 60s, a lot of times aren't in a 401k.
You just said something interesting, though, working into our 70s, hopefully by choice. But
By choice, most of the
one
time.
of the things, though, is that we are living longer. So to hear that phrase, we might need our viewing audience to kind of get used to it. We are probably going to work a little bit longer because we are living longer. So we need to take that into account. But this whole Roth conversation is to try to get ourselves to a tax-free bucket as much as possible, because this tax-free bucket can also affect the Social Security and that taxation later down the road, correct? Do we want to consider that?
Yeah, and so one of the things that we take a careful look at when we're talking about conversion is really the timing of it. And so it has to be at the right income tax level. We do have a bit of a ticking clock here with the tax laws potentially reverting back to where they were at the end of 2025. That has sped up the timeline for a lot of people as they consider whether or not a Roth conversion makes sense. I will tell you this, as you look at the Roth conversion, the hardest thing for people to get used to is the idea that I'm gonna have to pay a lot of upfront taxes. That tax price tag sometimes scares them away. So the only way that that makes sense is if you can see the tax savings, that price tag, over the next 20, 30 years as it pertains to their required minimum distribution. That's the money that the government makes you take out starting at typically around 74.
It is a very large and tough pill to swallow to take a look at what your tax consequences would be to do that Roth conversion. But then you can also extrapolate it out and show them you would be paying not only that, but probably more, especially if tax rates go up. You add in your Social Security, so we're just saying, let's rip that Band-Aid of taxes off right now as opposed to waiting down the road. We're going to take a short break here. Why don't you tell them a little bit about the Retirement Blueprint as we do every week?
Sure. The Retirement Blueprint is a written financial plan. It's a process that we trademarked that helps you design an income plan, tax plan, estate plan, healthcare, long-term care plan, along with an investment plan that makes sure that it incorporates all of those other areas of retirement planning. And you can get your very own Retirement Blueprint by simply calling the number that you see on the screen, 855-684-3485, or just click the QR code and you can set up a complimentary review where we can review things like Roth conversions and other areas of concern that you may have about your retirement.
Mr. Tim Lofton, I couldn't have said it better myself. More of the Retirement Blueprint Show with Tim Lofton right after this.
It goes back actually when I was 11 years old. That was the first time I discovered what not having money felt like. I remember being in Sunday school class and one of the parents came in to let us know that the ski trip, which was kind of a rite of passage at 12, was coming up. And so I got my permission slip and class got out and I was that kid. I was like running through the church and up the stairs and weaving in and out of people and got into the sanctuary, and I looked at the very back of the sanctuary and I saw my mom and she was there with 2 or 3 other ladies and they were talking. And I took off at a dead sprint and I'm waving this piece of paper and talking a mile a minute, and I get to her and she's like, "Wait, honey, what is it that you're saying?" And I said, "Mom," I said, "I can go. Like, I'm gonna be 12, I can go." And she's like, go to what? I'm like, the ski trip, the youth group ski trip. And I'll never forget it. She got down on one knee and she wrapped her arms around me and she said, "Baby," she said, we can't afford that this year." And it wasn't the disappointment of not being able to go on the trip. It was the look in her eyes that she couldn't afford it and that she couldn't do that for me. And I really think that that put me on the path of having a heart for helping people get to retirement, to be able to stay retired and to live their best life. And that all starts with advice. And that's what I chose to do for a living.
Welcome back to the Retirement Blueprint Show with Tim Lofton of Axum Planning and Wealth. I'm Spike Spangle. We were talking about Roth conversions before the break here. Is there an age, though, where it's really too late to try to take advantage of this kind of opportunity?
Well, interestingly enough, usually yes. There's usually, as you do the math, often there is kind of a cutoff point where you're making somewhat of a bet because I'm paying those taxes up front. So I have to make sure that I'm going to have that required minimum distribution that I'm not taking out now last long enough where it actually makes sense. But I'll tell you a story about...
You're laughing about it already.
I'm already
looking
laughing
forward
about
to
it.
this
It's
one.
just, very rarely, I've been doing this for 30 years, very rarely
Are
do
you
I...
surprised?
I'm surprised. And
Nice.
so as we're meeting with this client, and she's telling us her story, she's 82 years old. And one of the reasons that she came in, and she actually called in from the TV show, was that her required minimum distribution now is up over 17% a year that she has to take out and climbing. And she's getting all this income out. She doesn't need it. She doesn't want it. She can see the writing on the wall of how much more tax she's going to have to pay. And so her question was, what about me? Does this make sense? Does a Roth conversion at 82 make sense? And it almost never does, unless the person that you're talking to is not on any medications, has a personal trainer, and has family members that live to be 100. Now all of a sudden, 18 years.
I was going to say, I just did it. I was like 18-year flight trajectory
18
at
years,
least or
and
more.
the math works out. Now, is there still a risk there? Absolutely. If something happens to her in the next 4 or 5 years, then it was a bad idea.
But she will have just paid her taxes and now get into estate planning, and
Right.
they may have been paid anyway.
And she's going to, correct. And so it's not a big risk, but there is a risk the older you get. But I can honestly say I have never talked to an 82-year-old about Roth conversion, but it made sense for her, and it was a significant savings. If we, and basically over 12 to 15 years, it was going to be over a 6-figure savings in taxes that she wasn't going to have to pay net, even after she paid the taxes on the conversion.
All right, let's talk about some cautionaries of doing Roth conversion for retirement. Let's say we're 54, okay, or 55, somewhere around there. You've got a couple of old 401ks you've moved into your own IRA now. So now you're managing those hundreds of thousands on your own. Maybe you're having Axiom Planning and Wealth help you do it. If you do a Roth conversion there, you don't want to pay the money for the taxes out of that account because you'll have to pay, am I correct, like a 10% penalty because it's before the 59. So if you want to do Roth conversion before 59 and a half, you got to have all those taxes on the sideline, right?
Yes, and so we've had a couple of different clients that have been in that scenario where they had a pretty significant amount of money in a savings account, checking account, that was just kind of sitting there. And that was the discussion was, should I just invest this money? It's sitting here, not earning a lot. And this is back before the money markets were up to, 4% plus. Or does it make more sense to put that and use that as an investment towards converting my retirement to tax-free? And it made sense for both of them in that scenario. So they are making an investment. They're investing in changing the trajectory of their taxes forever on that money.
And would you also consider this, I'm not sure, would you consider this part of the plan of the refinancing the retirement, getting a hold of our tax consequences right now?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a major opportunity as we look at the potential sunset for taxes in our tax law the end of 2025. We basically have 23, 24, and 25 left to be able to do something. And
At these tax brackets.
At these tax brackets.
You could still probably do it later, but they will have gone up, and people
Well, it's
want
an
to know.
unknown.
Yeah.
It's an unknown, and that's the thing. I mean, we don't like unknowns. And so we know today what we're looking at. We can do the math. And, as we're looking at most people know what the price tag is or the cost on that conversion. But what we want to be able to show you is if you do the conversion, that's your tax cost here. Let us show you what the number is on the backside, because that's where...
Of what it could be little by little over a 30-year period,
Right.
and you can plug that into the software?
Yes. And once you're able to compare the numbers, it'll either make sense or it won't. I mean, you can look at it and say, all right, if it costs me $50,000 today to do a conversion, but I'm going to save $400,000 over the next 25 years,
Yeah.
for most people,
And when
it's
you're
a pretty
saying
easy
cost,
decision.
I want to be clear. If you're just walking in the room right now, say if it's going to cost me $50,000, I don't want it. It's $50,000 in your own taxes that you were going to pay anyways from that non-taxed
Right.
account. So $50,000 now compared to whatever the number might be, $200,000 down the road. Hopefully, even for me, that seems like simple enough math to figure out.
And I like to think about it as the realization of the actual value of your retirement account. We've talked about this on shows before where, we have $1 million in an IRA, but it's not really $1 million. It's really more like $700,000. But we feel this comfort level of seeing that $1 million, not realizing that if we were to take that money out, that's not the number that we're going to get. When you do that Roth conversion, the number on your statement is your number. And you know exactly where you are, you know exactly how it's going to be utilized as a tax-free income tool down the road, or as an estate planning tool to pass that money on tax-free.
There are estate planning advantages to moving these over to the Roths as well. We'll talk about that in another program. We've done a little bit on estate planning. I also know that they can go to your website, obviously call the phone number right here, but refinancing your retirement, yes, there are better, safer, if you want to say, or more reliable income streams right now in that safe money, things like CDs and money markets and so forth. I don't know how many people still really buy individual bonds, but getting into the bond market, that's a whole different area, or even sometimes annuity products. But to refinance the retirement, what else would you like to look at? Is there stuff inside the investments, the portfolio themselves, that we might want to refinance, if you will?
Well, I think we can talk about refinancing risk, Spike. As you look at, what is the risk that I'm currently taking? Is it too much? Is it not enough? A lot of times people don't know. And they're maybe on a trajectory to get to someplace they may not actually be headed to. And they may be doing it with not enough risk where they fall short, or too much risk where they're in, danger of not getting there at all.
Right. And part of this whole idea of refinancing your retirement is we want to take a look at everything, right? Mm-hmm. I like that, the refinancing the risk as well. Because look, to go back to the very beginning of the show, if you missed it, when interest rates go down, you do things like refinance your mortgage or your car, or maybe even try to get a lower credit card amount. But when interest rates go up, what can you refinance, Tim?
Your retirement.
We can take a look at that and see if that's in your best interest. Tim Lofton, thank you so much. Folks, make sure you get your own retirement blueprint started. You can call the phone number down on the bottom of the screen here. Come on into the office, call that secure number. We'll set up an appointment for you and get you your own retirement blueprint, your own draft of how you can be and stay retired without running out of income. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next week.